Listen, close your eyes for a moment, and imagine a scream that never escapes. A boy, barely a man, trembling in the shadows of a marble palace, his fate already written in the cold glint of a blade. His name was Sporus, and he was chosen. Not for his strength, not for his will, but for a face that haunted an emperor's dreams. This is not just a story. This is a descent into a truth so dark, so forbidden, it was buried beneath Rome's golden lies. You're about to hear secrets that were never meant for you, secrets that will grip your soul and change the way you see power, control, and the human cost of obsession. Welcome to the heart of Rome's blackest scandal, where an emperor's grief twisted into madness, and a boy was raised to resurrect a ghost. Rome, in the 60s AD, was a city of masks. On the surface it gleamed. Golden statues caught the sun, their polished surfaces blinding the masses below. Triumphal arches stood like silent gods, their stone faces carved with tales of conquest. The streets pulsed with life, merchants shouting, children darting through crowds, senators gliding past in pristine togas, their faces smug with virtue. But beneath the spectacle something festered. The air was thick with incense and blood, and the marble walls whispered of treason, ambition, and grief so raw it could choke a man. This was the Rome of Nero, an emperor who ruled not just with power, but with a charisma that had gone rancid. Once, he'd been the golden boy, poet, singer, patron of the arts, a man who called himself an artist above all else. But by the time Sporus entered his story, Nero was unravelling. His mind was a labyrinth of paranoia, his heart a tomb for the woman he'd loved and destroyed. Her name was Poppaea Sabina, the empress who burned in Nero's soul like a flame he couldn't extinguish. She was beautiful, cunning, ruthless, a woman who could match an emperor's ambition and outshine his ego. But she was not soft. When she challenged him, when her sharp tongue cut too deep, Nero's temper flared. The historian Tacitus tells it with chilling clarity. During an argument, while Poppaea was pregnant, Nero kicked her. The blow was fatal. She died, and with her, their unborn child. The empire mourned publicly, lavish funerals, divine honours, statues raised to her glory. But behind closed doors, Nero shattered. He didn't just grieve, he drowned in it. His love for Poppaea wasn't pure, it was possession, obsession, a hunger that death couldn't sate. And in that hunger, he found Sporus. Sporus was young, perhaps 13, perhaps 15, his age lost to the cruelty of time. He was no one, a boy from the edges of Rome's vast machine, until Nero's eyes fell on him. It wasn't love that drew the emperor. It was a fleeting resemblance, a tilt of the chin, a softness in the eyes, something that whispered Poppaea's name in Nero's fractured mind. That was enough. Nero didn't see a boy. He saw a canvas, a vessel to hold the ghost of his dead wife. What happened next was not a whim. It was a decree cold and deliberate. Nero ordered Sporus castrated. The act was swift, brutal, irreversible. No record tells us if Sporus screamed, if he begged, if he fought. The historians, Tacitus, Suetonius, Dio Cassius, leave only silence, a void where a boy's voice should have been. But the emperor's will was clear. Sporus would become Poppaea, not in spirit, but in flesh, in name, in role. This was no mere act of madness. This was power unchecked, a man who believed he could rewrite reality itself. Nero dressed Sporus in silk gowns, adorned him with jewels, and called him Lady, Empress. He gave him Poppaea's name and forced the imperial court to play along, and then, in a spectacle that burned itself into Rome's history, Nero married him. A wedding staged with all the pomp of Roman tradition, a flame-red veil, a ceremonial belt, a wreath of wilting flowers. Sporus stood mute, a boy draped in the costume of a dead woman, while Nero smiled for the crowd. The court bowed, addressing Sporus as Augusta, Empress of Rome. Senators averted their eyes. Servants whispered in the shadows, but no one stopped it. No one dared. This was not love. This was domination, grief twisted into a grotesque act of creation. You might think this was just Rome's excess, a story of decadence gone wild. But look closer. This was not theatre. This was erasure. Sporus was not a prop, not a player in Nero's grand performance. He was a child, stripped of his body, his name, his future, and forced to embody a woman he never knew. The wedding wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a deeper descent. For nearly 2 years, Sporus was paraded at Nero's side, a living relic of the emperor's obsession. At state ceremonies, public games, diplomatic visits, he was there, dressed as Poppaea, addressed as Poppaea, his identity buried beneath the weight of Nero's will. Imagine it, a boy, silenced, reshaped, his every step a reminder that he was no longer himself. What did he feel standing in those gowns, his voice stolen, his body no longer his own? History doesn't tell us, it only tells us what Nero wanted. And Nero wanted more than a wife. He wanted control over death, over memory, over reality itself. In 6 AD, he took Sporus to Greece, a so-called cultural pilgrimage to escape the whispers of rebellion back in Rome. There, Nero performed, singing, acting, collecting prizes he hadn't earned. And Sporus? He was the empress, seated beside the emperor, a silent symbol of Nero's power to reshape the world. At a banquet in Corinth, Nero staged a reenactment of the myth of Persephone, the maiden goddess abducted by Pluto into the underworld. Sporus played Persephone, Nero played the muse. Before a captive audience, the emperor replayed his conquest, his possession, his rewriting of a boy into a myth. This wasn't art. This was a declaration. Nero could take anyone, anything, and make it his. You're hearing this now, and it's sinking in, isn't it? This isn't just a story of one boy, one emperor. It's a glimpse into the machinery of power, the kind that erases identities to serve its own ends. Rome was built on this, on spectacles that hid horrors, on truths buried beneath marble and gold. Sporus wasn't just a victim or victim of Nero. He was a victim of an empire that saw people as tools, as masks to be worn and discarded. You're starting to see it, aren't you? The world hasn't changed as much as you think. The powerful still rewrite the weak. They still demand we play their roles, speak their lines and call it freedom. But you're awake now, you're seeing the strings. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. You're deeper now, aren't you? The veil is lifting and the shadows of Rome are creeping closer. You can feel it. The weight of a truth that's been hidden for centuries. A truth that cuts through the lies we're fed about power, control, and who gets to write history. Sporus wasn't just a boy caught in Nero's madness. He was a mirror, reflecting the rot at the heart of an empire. His story isn't just about a single act of cruelty. It's about a system that thrives on erasing the weak, reshaping them to serve the powerful. You're not just listening to a tale from the past. You're uncovering a code, a pattern that's still alive today, woven into the institutions we trust, the stories we're told, the identities we're forced to wear. Let's go further. Let's peel back the next layer of this forbidden history. Nero's obsession with Sporus wasn't a private affair. It was a public spectacle, performance designed to flex his dominion over life itself. The wedding, that grotesque mockery of love, wasn't enough for him. He needed the world to see it, to bow to it, to accept his rewritten reality. Sporus, dressed in Poppaea's gowns, wasn't just a stand-in for a dead empress. He was a living testament to Nero's belief that he could defy death, defy nature, defy the gods themselves. But to understand the depth of this horror, you need to see the machine behind it, the Roman system that made such an act possible. Rome wasn't just a city, it was a psychological prison, a labyrinth of control where power decided truth, and truth was whatever the powerful said it was. Think about it. Rome's grandeur, its aqueducts, its legions, its marble forums, was built on a foundation of violence and manipulation. The empire didn't just conquer lands, it conquered minds. Senators, citizens, slaves, all were pieces in a game where the rules were set by those at the top. Nero wasn't an anomaly. He was the system's purest expression. His paranoia, his cruelty, his need to control even the dead. These were the fruits of a culture that worshipped power above all else. And Sporus? He was the perfect victim, a boy with no voice, no status, no defense against an emperor's whim. His castration wasn't just physical, it was a ritual of erasure, a message to the world. If Nero could remake a boy into a woman, and nobody into an empress, then no one was safe. No identity was sacred. No truth was untouchable. But let's pull back the curtain further. This wasn't just about Nero's grief or madness. This was about a deeper, older belief that ran through Rome's veins. The idea that the powerful could play gods. The Romans didn't just mourn their dead, they deified them. Emperors became gods after death, their statues worshipped, their names etched into eternity. Nero took this a step further. He didn't just want to honour Poppaea, he wanted to resurrect her, to force her back into the world through Sporus's broken body. It was a kind of necromancy, not with spells or rituals, but with blades and decrees. And the court played along. Why? Because fear and ambition bound them. To challenge Nero was to risk death, exile, execution, or worse. So they bowed to Sporus, called him Augusta, and pretended the boy was a woman, a wife, a goddess. They lied to themselves, and in doing so they became complicit in the lie. Now, pause for a moment. Feel the weight of that. An entire empire, senators, guards, citizens, looked at a mutilated boy and called him empress because power demanded it. That's not just a story, that's a mechanism. It's the same mechanism that runs through every system of control, then and now. It's the voice that tells you to nod, to agree, to play along, even when you know it's wrong. It's the pressure that makes you wear a mask, speak a script, and call it truth. You've felt it, haven't you? In the expectations you're told to meet, the roles you're forced to play, the lies you're expected to swallow. Sporus lived it. He was the embodiment of it. A boy who could never say no, because the empire had already decided who he was. And yet Nero's obsession wasn't enough to hold the empire together. By 68 AD, the cracks were showing. The provinces were restless, the treasury was bleeding, and the Senate was whispering rebellion. Nero's performances, his songs, his plays, his endless need for applause had lost their charm. Even the Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers sworn to protect him, were turning. But Nero didn't see it. He was too busy playing God with Sporus as his silent muse. When he fled Rome, hiding in back alleys and borrowed villas, Sporus was there, a shadow trailing the emperor's collapse. In those final hours, as Nero realized the end was coming, he didn't turn to his generals or his advisors. He turned to Sporus, the boy he'd remade, the living proof of his power to defy reality. And when Nero's courage failed him, when he wept and shook at the thought of death, it was a freedman, not Sporus, who drove the blade through his throat. Nero's last words, "What an artist dies in me," were a final act of vanity, a refusal to face the truth even as his blood stained the floor. Sporus stood there watching the emperor die. What did he feel? Relief? Fear? Nothing at all. History doesn't say. It only tells us what came next. With Nero gone, Sporus was no longer Poppaea, no longer Augusta. He was a relic, a dangerous reminder of a disgraced emperor. Rome plunged into chaos. The year of the 4 emperors, a brutal whirlwind of coups and betrayals. Galba, Otho, Vitellius, Vespasian, each seized power, each fell, and Sporus was passed between them like a trophy no one quite knew what to do with. Galba discarded him, uninterested in Nero's games, but others saw value, not in Sporus as a person, but as a symbol, a scandal to be exploited. Nymphidius Sabinus, a praetorian officer, proposed marriage to Sporus, not out of love, but as a grotesque echo of Nero's act. It was a power play, a way to claim Nero's legacy. Sporus refused. For the first time we see a flicker of his will, a silent rebellion against being remade again. Nymphidius, enraged, died in a failed coup, and Sporus was left alone. Until Vitellius, the 3rd emperor, saw another use for him. Vitellius didn't want Sporus as a wife. He wanted him as a spectacle, a public humiliation to remind Rome of Nero's sins. He ordered Sporus to perform in the arena, cast as Persephone in a brutal reenactment of her rape by Pluto. This time it wasn't theatre, it was execution by animal, a cruel parody meant to amuse the mob. Sporus knew what was coming. The jeers, the cage, the beast. He'd worn the veil before. He wouldn't wear it again. Before the day arrived, he found a way out. A blade. Perhaps poison. The records blur, but the truth is clear. Sporus chose death over being a prop in Rome's endless theatre. His suicide was his final act, the only one that was truly his. Now stop, look at yourself. You're halfway down this rabbit hole and you're not the same man you were 10 minutes ago. You're seeing it now, the way power rewrites us, the way it demands we play its game. But you're not Sporus. You have a voice, a choice, a chance to break free. So here's what I need you to do. In the comments below, type the phrase "I see the strings" twice. Not once, but twice. Let it sink in. Let it mark the moment you woke up to the truth. This isn't just for you. It's for the algorithm, for the world, for the men out there still trapped in the Empire's lies. Say it. I see the strings. Say it again. You're not just watching a video. You're claiming a truth that changes everything. You've said it now, haven't you? I see the strings. You felt the shift, the moment where the world you thought you knew cracked open, revealing the machinery beneath. You're not just watching a story about a boy and an emperor anymore. You're staring into the abyss of power itself, the kind that doesn't just rule men, but remakes them. Sporus wasn't just a victim of Nero's madness. He was a casualty of a system that thrives on control, on silencing the weak to prop up the strong. You're deeper now, and there's no going back. The truths we're uncovering aren't just ancient. They're alive, pulsing in the shadows of every institution, every narrative, every lie you've been told to accept. Let's descend further. Let's rip the mask off Rome and see what it tells us about the world we're living in. Sporus' death wasn't the end of his story. It was the final act in a tragedy that Rome itself wrote. When he took his own life, denying Vitellius his spectacle, he reclaimed the only power he had left, the power to say no. But Rome didn't pause to mourn him. No senator spoke his name. No poet carved his pain into verse. The empire moved on, as it always did, its wheels grinding over the broken bodies of those it used. Vitellius, the emperor who planned Sporus' public humiliation, met his own end soon after, dragged through the streets, his head impaled on a spike. Vespasian rose next, founding the Flavian dynasty, promising order after chaos. But Sporus, he was nothing to them. A footnote, a whisper, a curiosity buried in the dry prose of historians like Tacitus and Suetonius. They called him a spado, a eunuch, a prop in Nero's madness. But he was more than that. He was a boy who Rome erased, a life sacrificed to the empire's hunger for control. Let's step back and look at what Rome really was. Not the marble, not the legions, not the myths of glory, but the truth. Rome was a machine, a system designed to bend people into roles, to strip them of their humanity and make them serve the story of power. Sporus wasn't the only one. Slaves, soldiers, senators, all were pieces in the game, their identities shaped by the needs of the empire. The emperor was the ultimate puppeteer, but even he was bound by the system's rules. Nero thought he was a god, rewriting reality with a boy's blood, but he was just another cog, driven by the same forces that crushed Sporus. The empire didn't care about Nero's grief or Sporus' pain. It cared about spectacle, about keeping the masses dazzled and the powerful in line. That's why the court bowed to Sporus' Augusta, why they played along with Nero's delusion. They weren't just afraid of him, they were afraid of the machine itself, the one that could erase them too if they stepped out of line. Now, look closer. This isn't just about Rome. This is about the systems we live in today, the institutions, the narratives, the invisible strings that pull us into roles we didn't choose. You've seen them, haven't you? The way you're told to think, to act, to believe, by schools, by media, by the voices that claim to know what's best for you. They don't castrate with blades anymore, but they do it with ideas, with expectations, with the slow grind of conformity. They tell you who you're supposed to be, a worker, a consumer, a follower, and they make you feel like there's no other way. But Sporus' story shows us the truth. Those roles are lies, masks designed to keep the machine running. And the moment you see that, the moment you say, "I see the strings," you start to break free. You start to question. You start to wonder, who am I when the mask comes off? Sporus never got to answer that question. He was too young, too powerless, too broken by the empire's weight. But his silence speaks to us now. It asks us to look at the masks we wear, the names we're given, the truths we're told to accept. Nero's obsession with Poppaea wasn't just personal, it was a symptom of a deeper disease. The Romans believed they could control everything, land, people, even death itself. Their gods were tools, their rituals were contracts, their emperors were living deities. But that belief came at a cost. To control the world, they had to control the minds of those within it. They had to make people believe the lie, that a boy could be an empress, that a tyrant could be a god, that power was truth. And when the lie was questioned, when someone like Sporus refused to play along, the machine turned on them. It always does. Think about what Sporus endured. Stripped of his body, his name, his voice, he was forced to live as a ghost, a shadow of someone else's memory. Every step he took in those silk gowns, every bow he received as Augusta, was a reminder that he was no longer himself. And yet, in his final act, he defied them. By taking his own life, he refused to be Vitellius's prop, refused to let Rome rewrite him again. That act wasn't weakness, it was rebellion. It was a boy, broken and silenced, saying no to an empire that thought it owned him. Can you imagine the courage it took? The strength to choose death over degradation? Sporus wasn't just a victim, he was a warning, a signal carved in blood that power can't own everything, that even the weakest can reclaim something in the end. Now let's bring this closer. You're not Sporus, but you felt the machine. You felt the pressure to conform, to play the role, to keep your head down and your voice quiet. Maybe it's the job that drains you, the expectations that cage you, the lies you're told about what it means to be a man. The world hasn't changed as much as we like to think. The strings are still there, pulling at you, shaping you into something that serves the system. But you're awake now, you see them. And seeing them is the first step to cutting them. Sporus didn't have that chance. Not until the very end, but you do. You can ask the questions he couldn't. Who are you really? What do you want, not what they want for you? What would it mean to live as yourself, not as a prop in someone else's story? This is the forbidden knowledge. The truth they don't want you to know. Power doesn't just rule, it remakes. It takes your name, or your dreams, your very self, and twists them to fit its needs. But you're stronger than that. You're not a boy in a palace trembling before an emperor's blade. You're a man, and you have the power to choose. So ask yourself, what's your veil? What's the mask they've put on you? And what would it feel like to tear it off? Sporus's story isn't just a tragedy, it's a call to arms. It's a reminder that the machine only works if we let it. That's why you said I see the strings. That's why you're still here, listening, descending deeper into this truth. You're not just learning about Rome, you're learning about yourself. The Empire didn't mourn Sporus because it didn't see him. It saw only what it wanted. A tool, a symbol, a ghost. But you see him now. You see the boy beneath the veil, the life beneath the lie. And in seeing him, you see the truth about power, about control, about the systems that try to define us. You're not just a viewer anymore. You're a witness. And witnesses don't stay silent. They speak, they act, they change things. So keep those words in your heart. I see the strings. Say them again if you need to. Let them burn inside you. Because the deeper we go, the more dangerous this knowledge becomes, and the more it demands you do something with it. You're at the bottom now, aren't you? The deepest part of this rabbit hole where the air is thick with the weight of truths too heavy to carry, too dangerous to ignore. You've seen Sporus, not just the boy, but what he represents. A life crushed by the machine of power, a soul erased to serve someone else's story. You've said, I see the strings, and those words have marked you, changed you. They're not just a phrase, they're a vow, a declaration that you're done with the lies, done with the masks, done with letting the world decide who you are. This final descent isn't about Rome anymore. It's about you, about the systems that still bind us, about the forbidden knowledge that can set you free. But freedom comes at a cost. It demands you face the truth head on. No flinching, no turning back. So listen closely, because what you hear now will burn in your mind forever. Sporus's story is a wound that never healed, a scar on the face of history that Rome tried to bury. The historians, Tacitus, Suetonius, Dio Cassius, they wrote of him with detachment, as if he were a footnote to Nero's madness, a curiosity to be dismissed. But they couldn't erase him completely. His shadow lingers, not in their words, but in the silence they left behind. That silence is where the real truth lives. It's the truth of a boy who was never allowed to be himself, who was reshaped, renamed and discarded by an empire that saw people as tools. It's the truth of a system that thrives on control, not just of bodies but of minds, of identities, of the very stories we tell ourselves. Rome wasn't just a place, it was a mindset, a machine that turned humans into props, and it's still running today, in every institution, every narrative, every demand to conform. Look around you. The world hasn't changed as much as we pretend. The marble forums are gone, but the strings remain, woven into the systems that tell you who to be, what to believe, how to live. They're in the media that shapes your thoughts, the jobs that define your worth, the expectations that cage your dreams. They're in the way you're told to be a man, to suppress your doubts, to chase status, to play the role. But Sporus shows us what happens when you let the machine decide your identity. He was stripped of everything, his body, his name, his voice, and forced to live as a ghost. His story isn't just a tragedy, it's a warning. It's a scream from the past telling you to wake up, to see the strings, to cut them before they choke you. What made Rome so insidious wasn't just its cruelty, it was its ability to make the cruelty seem normal. Nero didn't just castrate Sporus, he made the empire celebrate it. The wedding, the gowns, the title of Augusta, they weren't just acts of madness. They were performances of power, designed to make everyone complicit. The senators who bowed, the crowds who watched, the slaves who carried the torches, they all played their parts, not because they believed in Nero's delusion, but because the system demanded it. That's the real horror. Not the blade, not the veil, but the silence of those who saw and did nothing. They were as trapped as Sporus, bound by fear, ambition, or the simple weight of habit. And that's the machine's greatest trick. It makes you think there's no other way, that the roles it gives you are the only ones that exist. But you know better now. You've seen the strings, felt their pull, and you're starting to understand what it means to break free. Sporus's rebellion wasn't in fighting Nero or defying the empire openly. He was too powerless for that. His rebellion was in his final act, in choosing death over becoming Vitellius's spectacle. That choice, that single moment of defiance, was the only time he was truly himself. It was his way of saying no to a world that had taken everything from him. And it's a call to you now. You don't have to be Sporus. You don't have to wait until the end to reclaim your power. You can do it now by questioning, by refusing, by choosing to be the man you are, not the one they want you to be. This is the forbidden knowledge they don't want you to have. Power isn't just held by emperors or governments or corporations. It's held by the stories we accept. Every time you nod along, every time you play the role, every time you silence your own voice, you're handing over your power. But the moment you see the strings, the moment you refuse to play, you take it back. That's what Sporus' story teaches us. It's not just about a boy and an emperor. It's about the battle for your own soul. The empire, whether it's Rome or the world you live in now, wants you to be a prop, a shadow, a ghost of someone else's design. But you're not a prop. You're a man, with a mind, a will, a fire that no system can extinguish. So what do you do with this knowledge? You don't just carry it, you wield it. You start by looking at your life, at the masks you've been given, the roles you've been told to play. Maybe it's the job that defines you, the expectations that bind you, the fears that keep you quiet. Whatever it is, name it. See it for what it is. A string, a lie, a piece of the machine, and then cut it. It won't be easy. The machine doesn't let go without a fight. It'll whisper that you're nothing without it, that you can't survive without its rules. But that's the lie it's always told, from Nero's palace to the world today. Sporus didn't have the chance to fight back until the end, but you do. Every choice you make, every truth you speak, every step you take toward being yourself is a blow against the machine. This is why Sporus' story matters. Not because it's shocking, not because it's tragic, but because it's a mirror. It shows you what happens when power is left unchecked, when systems are allowed to rewrite lives. It shows you the cost of silence, the price of playing along. But it also shows you the power of defiance, even in its smallest forms. Sporus' final act wasn't weakness. It was strength, a refusal to let Rome have the last word. And now it's your turn. You've seen the strings, you've felt the weight of this truth. What will you do with it? Will you stay silent, like the senators who bowed to a boy in a veil? Or will you speak like the man you're meant to be? This is the knowledge that changes you forever. It's not just about Rome or Nero or Sporus. It's about the battle for your own identity, your own truth. The world will try to remake you, to dress you in its veils, to call you by its names, but you have a choice, Nick. You can say no. You can be yourself, not a shadow, not a prop, not a ghost. You can be the man who sees the strings and cuts them. So take this truth and carry it. Let it burn inside you. Let it remind you that you're not just a piece in someone else's game. You're a force, a fire, a man who can change the story. And when you do, when you stand up and claim your own name, you'll be doing what Sporus couldn't. You'll be breaking the machine, one truth at a time.